few of our students have been asking us about Device Library Plus, which is something they've noticed in Rekordbox recently. And we're talking about this right now because it's something you don't have a choice about in Rekordbox anymore. So this is for you if you use standalone all-in-one DJ gear, such as the Opus Quad, or maybe you use Pioneer DJ's RX3, or maybe you've got something like this. Anything that you plug in a USB or sometimes an SD to DJ from without the laptop, then you're going to need to know about this. If you're a laptop DJ, you don't need to know about this at all. It doesn't concern you. And if you use export link mode when you plug in a cable between your standalone gear and Rekordbox on a laptop, again, it doesn't concern you. It's only about exporting to USB drive or SD card. All right then, so it's a new database that's added to your USB stick or your SD card from Rekordbox when you export playlists to DJ with. And it's added alongside the music files. So as I say, it's not for anything other than that. There has actually been such a database for many years added to drives. So this is an additional one. This is added since Rekordbox 6.8.1 without you having a choice. And before Rekordbox 6.8.1, you did have a choice, but now it's adding this Device Library Plus to every USB or SD you export. And it's doing that alongside the existing device library. So let's go and take a little look inside Rekordbox at what's going on here. This is the older version of Rekordbox. And then if you went to the preferences and to DJ System Device, you could actually see these. This choice has been there ever since the Opus Quad was launched, because the Opus Quad uses Device Library Plus. We're going to talk about why in a minute. But you've always had this choice. Now, since the latest version of Rekordbox 6.8.1, you don't have the choice of either or there. It's going to add both of these to your USB drive, whether you like it or not. Now, these are important. These device library database files are important because they contain additional information about the music on the USB or the SD. Track and playlist info, cues, loops you may have added, beat grid info, history, and so on. So your DJ gear uses this info to make DJing with your playlists work properly. If you've ever plugged in a USB that's only got music on it to something like this, or an RX3, or a CDJ 3000 or 2000 system or whatever, and try to DJ with it, you'll see that it really isn't a very good experience. You don't get any track titles or artwork or waveforms or cues or anything. It's just like really old school. So it's important to have this device library on there. There's now a new one, an additional one. You now see two on there. If you were to open this in your Windows or Mac Explorer or Finder and have a look, you'd see there's two device libraries there, and you don't get a choice about that. So we're going to talk about why and what this means to you now. Okay, so the old device library is just that. It's old. It's slow, it's limiting for modern hardware. So in order to support new gear, such as the Opus Quad that we have here, and any DJ units, standalone all-in-one units that are released from here onwards for Rekordbox, in order to support this kind of gear, that's what Device Library Plus is for. So expect it for all new gear, and this is only the start. This one here is literally the first piece of gear that will work with it. Funnily enough, this doesn't. We'll talk about this in a minute. So it's important, and it's something you won't be ignoring over time. Of course, as new gear is released, it's going to slowly move from the old type of library to the new one. So the next question is, what does this mean for me? Well, usually it means nothing. Just carry on as you were. If you DJ on older gear, it will use the older database, and new gear will use the newer database. While it does take up a bit more space on your USB or SD, it's a tiny amount really, so it's not worth worrying about. In other words, just carry on as normal. Let the software do its thing in the background. Everything will be fine. When you finish DJing, get your USB, plug it back into the computer. Any cue points, any history from that will come back to your main version of Rekordbox. There's no change at all to your workflow if you just want to carry on using whatever piece of DJ gear you have. However, if you DJ on both older gear, which means at the moment anything that isn't the Opus Quad, and that includes the relatively recent CDJ 3000s, this is actually classed as older gear. This uses the old library system, not the new system. So if you DJ, say, on stuff like this in the club, whereas at home you've got something like this, that counts as DJing on both older gear and on newer gear. So if that's you, then you're going to find that there's things you need to know about, because any changes you make when actually DJing on one type of gear will only be reflected in that gear's library. So to sync those changes over to the other library to use on the other gear you might use, you have to import back to Rekordbox for Mac or Windows from that USB and then re-export to USB. So what that means is that, say I'm DJing on an Opus Quad and I've got my USB plugged into it, of course, and I change some cue points. And obviously there's a history file building up in the Opus Quad while I'm playing. It's all been recorded here in the new library on here, in the new database on here. So now if I take this out of the Opus Quad and I head off to my gig, and my gig happens to be on this gear, which uses the old database, or maybe an RX3 in a bar or something, and I plug in here, any changes I've made on this, on the Opus Quad, will not show on this because they haven't been synced back to the main Rekordbox running on the computer. So the workflow to fix that is to get to your Rekordbox, to plug in your USB drive and to bring back the history and all the other stuff from the USB back into your computer, and then re-export it to the USB drive, and then you'll get a copy of both the old and the new database on the USB that will then be up to date whether you're playing on something that uses the new database or something that uses the old database. Now, when it comes to deleting playlists, you should do so on both device libraries on Rekordbox for Mac or Windows on your laptop. And then that means that when you plug into either of the units, it will be up to date. So I've plugged my USB into the laptop here. And now down here, you can see the USB and you can see both my device libraries. This is the device library and this is the device library plus, and my playlist as well here. There's nothing on this one at the moment. So if I wanted to delete a playlist, I'd need to do so from here and from here in order that it wouldn't appear in both of those libraries. If you're making a playlist or changing a playlist, the best way to do it is in your main collection and then re-export it. And again, then your playlist is going to end up exactly the same on both devices. So I guess the next question is, what do you need to do? You don't need to do anything. Get up to Rekordbox 6.8.1. This is just all going to happen. And as long as you're aware of the things I've just talked about, you won't have any surprises. However, as far as Pioneer DJ is concerned, we think that they ought to get to work pretty quickly on getting the CDJ 3000 players with a firmware upgrade or whatever they need to do to work with the new database, because these players are now immediately out of date because they don't work on the new database at the moment, which for a very, very expensive flagship system is not ideal. So we'd like to see that, so that if you are a DJ, for instance, that plays on a system like that when you're out and about, but you play on a system like this, the Opus Quad, when you're at home, you're not having to do all this flipping back and forth, deleting twice for playlists, changing playlists in one place and then re-exporting and all that stuff just to keep everything up to date. It's a little bit of a hack the way they've done it now. But for most DJs, most of the time, because you only ever play on one piece of gear, it's not going to make any difference anyway, because that database is just going to continue to be used for that piece of gear like usual, and the other one will sit on your hard drive not doing very much at all. So if you have any questions about this, because it is a little bit technical, then do ask underneath. You know, this is just progress. This is the way things change. This is the way that manufacturers make their gear do stuff that it couldn't do before. It's pretty inevitable when you're using software to power things. Ultimately, this kind of gear is powered by software, and the software develops, and as the gear develops, it does need to kind of move in tandem so that the features that you want and that we all like can be added. So I wouldn't blame them about this. They've done their best to make it easy for you, and I hope this video has explained a little bit more about how it works so you're a little bit less confused. Again, ask underneath if you've got any questions. Meanwhile, get good, get out there, make the moments, and I'll see you in another tutorial very soon.